Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, let me just get all this straight. The Republicans want to repeal Obamacare, but it really goes way beyond that. The Republicans, you'll recall, Ronald Reagan. Actually, I used to have a clip of that. Should have thought about it earlier. I'm sorry. But in any case, Reagan back in the 1960s, in 65, 66, whatever year it was that I'm pretty sure it was 65, whatever year it was that LBJ was pushing Medicare through Congress. And by the way, Robert Ball, the guy who actually wrote the Medicare legislation, after the legislation was passed, on the record said, you know, I talked with President. I'm paraphrasing here, but you know, this is in my book Threshold. He said, you know, we talked with President Johnson, and we all agreed that first we're going to cover people over 65, and then we're going to start lowering the eligibility age until everybody in the country is covered. So Medicare was originally conceived of as a single-payer healthcare system. So anyhow, we've got Medicare and we've got Medicaid. Medicaid, of course, also came out of the Great Society. Medicaid covers very poor people at the state level, and at the federal level, via the states, covers those people who are working. 100% of them are working, who are making too much to be eligible for state Medicaid, but not enough to be eligible for Obamacare. And of course, those red states that have not expanded Medicaid are just, you know, sticking it to their. So you get situations like Charlene Dill in Florida, which did not expand Medicaid, who couldn't afford her heart medication because she was only working 3 jobs a week. You know, three jobs. She had 2 little kids, and she died of a heart attack because she didn't take her medication, and her blood is on Rick Scott's hands. But in any case, you've got the Republicans saying the United States, our federal government, should really have nothing to do with health care at all. Ronald Reagan, back in 1965, making a recording that the AMA sent this 33 LP. My dad had one of these. Sent it to political activists all over the country, where Ronald Reagan said, someday we will look back at those times, you know, if Medicare passes, socialized medicine, someday we will look back and say, I remember a time when Americans were free. That was Reagan in 65. They're still saying this, right? Medicare diminishes our freedom. Medicaid diminishes our freedom. Obamacare diminishes our freedom. That's the Republican mantra. Now, what do they mean? Well, what they mean is, from the point of view of millionaires and billionaires, it raises their taxes, which they think of as diminishing their freedom. That's really what it means. And this is of particular concern to billionaires because, you know, they get so much of their money through capital gains, and they only pay a 20% income tax, and there's a 3.9% surcharge on capital gains to help pay for poor people on Obamacare. And the Republicans are trying to do away with that. That's the $300 billion tax cut to end that surcharge on capital gains taxes. So back to my story here. Let me just give you a very, very simple thing. You know, the Koch brothers, David Koch in 1980 ran for president or for vice president on the platform of ending Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Just end them. The government should have no business doing these things. This is socialism. This is the, at least it was explicitly the Koch perspective. I believe it's still to be. Number one. Number two, the Kochs have funded this thing. The Koch network has funded a group of politicians, group of Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives, who refer to themselves as the Cokehead Caucus. I'm sorry, as the Freedom Caucus. I call them the Cokehead Caucus. And so yesterday, the Kochs said to these guys, if you vote against the president, because see, there's 2 piles of money here that they're fighting for. There's the Koch money, and there's also Paul Ryan's money. Paul Ryan runs a super PAC. Paul Ryan himself is a multimillionaire, but his super PAC is worth multi-millions. And so Paul Ryan just yesterday cut off 2 Republicans from his super PAC because they had said, no, we're not going to vote for this health care bill. He announced, you know, we're cutting you off. We're closing the office. I think one of them was in Idaho or Iowa. He said, we're closing the office that was there to support you. So the Koch brothers step up and they say to the Freedom Caucus, don't worry. We're creating a specific fund to make sure that you guys get elected if you vote against the president, if you vote no, because we want even more draconian cuts in American health care. This bill only goes halfway. That's not enough. So at that point, then the Freedom Caucus becomes, like 30 no votes for the president. And so Trump is looking around going, okay, Trump is a billionaire. The Kochs are billionaires. They know each other. Trump used to be part of the Koch network. He used to go to the meetings. And so Trump is saying, okay, how do I get these congressmen who are owned by the Kochs to vote my way? Well, real easy. You don't talk to the congressman. You talk to the Kochs. Which brings us to the Washington Post. This piece by Steve Mufson and Juliet Alperin, March 20th, 2014. And really the headline says it all. The headline of this story by Steve Mufson, M-U-F-S-O-N, and Juliet Alperin, E-I-L-P-E-R-I-N, on March 20th, 2014. The headline in the Washington Post: the biggest foreign leaseholder in Canada's oil sands is not ExxonMobil or Chevron. It's the Koch brothers. Yes, that's the headline of the Washington Post piece. The Koch brothers are the biggest potential recipients of money, Americans, of money from the Canadian tar sands. The problem is they got to get that tar sands oil from Canada down to the refineries on the Gulf of Mexico so that they can refine it, extract the poisons from it, dump those poisons on poor communities of color in Texas and Louisiana, and ship the diesel fuel and refined gasoline out of the United States for a profit. How do you do that? You got to have the Keystone XL pipeline. So the Kochs can't make money off their tar sands investment until they get the Keystone XL pipeline. So what did the president do this morning? He held a ceremony in the White House, covered by all the networks so it would not be missed by the Kochs, in my opinion, to sign the document saying the Keystone pipeline is ready to go. David and Charles, you've got your tar sands money coming. And I think, now I could be completely wrong. Conspiracy theories very often bite you in the butt. And this is one. But it looks to me like if you line the dots up, right? The Kochs are fighting the president on this health care bill. The president, and they're doing it through their proxies, their wholly owned politicians in the so-called Freedom Caucus. So the president goes to the Kochs and says, hey, I'll give you another $1 billion in revenue from your oil, your tar sands investment, or however much it is. It might be multiple billions. It might just be millions. I don't know. But, I'll give you your tar sands. Will you give me my health care bill? And I'm seriously wondering, if as a result of what the president did this morning, if the Koch brothers are going to back off on their demand to the so-called Freedom Caucus, that they vote no on the American Health Care Act, AHCA, named so that it sounds sort of like ACA because everybody likes the ACA because, that's how Republicans name things. Like, when George Bush wanted to increase the levels of pollution that could be dumped into the air, he called it the Clear Skies Act. When he wanted to allow, big polluting companies, chemical companies, mining operations, to dump more waste into our rivers, he called it the Clean Water Act. Clear Skies Initiative. So what do you think? It's Anything Goes Friday, by the way. We can talk about anything you want. But this just really strikes me as transactional politics. The president saying, okay, you don't want, you're offering to pay people to do this. I'll offer to pay you to pay people to do that. In my humble opinion. Now, maybe I'm completely wrong. I doubt you'll hear this on network television, though, because Koch Industries and the fossil fuel industry are advertising heavily on television, and so they just don't get covered anymore. I'll just restate this real quickly. The Koch brothers are the largest owner of tar sands in Canada. In order to realize profit from that, they have to have the Keystone XL pipeline to bring that to the Koch refineries, or other refineries for that matter, in the United States, particularly the ones down by the southern, the Gulf of Mexico, where they ship the refined gasoline and diesel fuel off to England and China and whatnot, while we keep the poison from the refineries here, to poison communities of color downwind from the refineries in Texas. And so Donald Trump says to the Koch brothers, in my opinion, this morning, I'll give you your tar sands. I'll give you the Keystone XL pipeline. Now, will you please give me 10 or 15 congressmen from the so-called Freedom Caucus, which you own? So we'll see. I mean, maybe I'm just completely imagining a deal here, but I don't think so. I think Donald Trump actually knows how billionaires think, being one himself, maybe, or at least playing one on television and in the White House. We'll be back with your thoughts on all of this right after this.